Welcome back to episode 16 of Dark Academia Queen. If you're new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, please subscribe. Help a girl out. Also, I do have three sister podcasts if you're interested in those. It's called True Crime Lounge, Just a Breezy Chat, and Sassy Southern Belle. Okay, now with that being said, why don't we dive into today's episode, shall we? Today, I've been talking a lot about Dark Academia, but I really want to talk about let me explain Dark Academia because a lot of people don't know what it is and might have an interest in it and just don't know it yet. But Dark, now here's the thing: it really did start off as like make a really hit rise in during the pandemic. But do we really know what Dark Academia is? Like, if we take the time to actually research it? Well, here's the thing. Gothic architecture is a common element of the dark academia aesthetic. And dark academia is a internet aesthetic and subculture concerned with higher education, the arts and theater, literature and idealized version thereof. And the aesthetic centers on traditional educational clothing, interior design activities such as writing and poetry, ancient art, classic literature as well as classical Greek and collegiate Gothic architecture. And the trend emerged on social media site on Tumblr in 2015 before being popularized by adolescents and young adults in the late 2010s and early 2020s. I was that one in the late 2010s. Not gonna lie. It was particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. Oh my gosh. I don't even remember 2020. I'm trying to forget that year ever happened. But what is the aesthetic behind it? Well, the collegiate Gothic architecture is a popular theme within the aesthetic in the fashions of the 30s and 40s, prominently in the dark academia aesthetic, particularly in clothing that is associated with attendance in Oxbridge and the Ivy League schools, prep schools of the time period, and a number of articles with clothing most associated with the aesthetic are cardigans, blazers, dress shirts, plaid skirts, Oxford shoes, and clothing made of houndset with an intrigue and colors palette, consisting many of them with beige and browns and dark greens and occasionally navy blue. The subculture also draws on idealist aesthetics of higher education from academia, often with books and libraries, featuring featuring prominently in activities such as calligraphy, museum visits, libraries, coffee shops, and all-night studying sessions, common among proponents. Now, there are many seasonal imageries of autumn that are very common in this. Is imagery of Gothic and collegiate Gothic architecture, candlelight, dark wood, and furniture. This in cluttered rooms often occurs in the subculture and how it has been described as a maximalist and nostalgic. Universities that are often featured on dark academia image boards are University of Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard. And the subcultures are similarities with the goth subcultures, um, tending to romanticize the feeling and finding a beauty in poetry and dark themes. And Tim Brinkhoff of Big Think has stated that the moody architectural and philosophical pessimism are key aspects to this aesthetic. Hannah Southwick of US Today has described it as a melancholic aesthetic, citing a fashion stylist who described it as a boarding school meets Gothic enthusiast. Now, what is the history that has emerged? Well, this trend emerged on social media site Tumblr in 2015, an aesthetic that has captured the imaginations and mass and maturing Harry Potter generation. Look, I'm a Ravenclaw. I'm happy to admit it, mixed with a little bit of Slytherin. So, I'm gonna be a Hufflepuff. But I'm definitely more Ravenclaw than anything. If you knew me, you would truly understand that personality trait so well. My friends know it. Me and my friend Gabby. Girl, if you're watching, you know I love you. Um, we're both Ravenclaws, so we get it. And it has but anyway, it has various fandoms on the sites to share Gothic revival interior architectural photos, and the aesthetic then grew into a distinct subculture, seeing a wave of popu- popularization on Instagram that was led by Ryan Taylor and Maria Teresa Negro in 2017. And Dark Academia rose to popularity, and during the pandemic, oh my gosh, the pandemic. You guys and I both know that was a year. That was not like the sad part is that was not a bad year for me. I was very fortunate to have a job in that period, but it's like this year has been the worst year of my life compared to the pandemic. I'm not gonna lie to you on that one. But this had an increased interest in dark academia, with schools being credited to shut down the schools. Now, what are some of the works of dark academia? Well, a number of classic works in literature, such as Oscar Wilde's *The Picture of Dorian Gray* and *Maurice* by E.M. Forster, and then as the works of writers such as Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe Shelley have been cited for either influential or popular among the subculture, fitting within the subcultural aesthetics. Donna Tartt's novel *The Secret History*, published in 1992, which tells the story of a murder that takes place within a place of classic students at a New England liberal arts college, and has been credited to as many as being the inspiration on the trend. Others, more recent books such as R.F. Kuang's novel *Farewell*, the Harry Potter series, and *If We Were Villains* by M.L. Rio. Now, there have been a number of films and TV series that have been credited fitting into this aesthetic. For example, The Dead Poets Society is a clear example. 2013's film Kill Your Darlings is also one, and have in particular been credited as among the sources of inspiration of dark academia. Writing in the Screen Rant, Kalina Fisk-Bowen has listed TV shows like Aries, The Umbrella Academy, and a series of unfortunate events, The Queen's Gambit, and The Magicians among the works as many as that goes into the aesthetic. Now, the curated playwrights have also been inspired by dark academia and published outlets such as Van Magazine and Spotify, and such playlists focused on the 19th and early 20th century Western classical music, with a particular emphasis on the Romantic and Impressionist composer. There is a reception that follows this. So, Zoe Robertson stated that the subculture draws on sedative depictions of shadowy extravagance and reminds her that the rot of the foundation of the institutions that she can't stay away from. And one writer compared it to a contemporary cottage core lifestyle aesthetic, saying that the cottage core requires a home and country leisure for crafting. Dark academia's simple act of putting a blazer and reading Dostoevsky for a fair time is far more doable. Now, some commentators have also attributed rise in popularity of subculture as a reaction to cuts to universities' funding and corporatization on higher education. Honey Salt writer Ezra, Azara Norton stated that it reveals a deep disillusionment with um, education models that devalue knowledge unless it has been used to generate profit, and a longing for space to learn unencumbered by neoliberal agendas. Writing with Jacobin, Amelia Horgan argued that the trend was part of the response to the pandemic, which resulted in students leaving campuses to learn in family homes in which many did not have access to adequate study space. This was a fantasy of the university experience in which they were unable to attain. However, she also noted that it was presented in an aesthetic way, where it was very different in that the contemporary university highlighted trends in the UK academia as an example of the impacts of neoliberal policies on education, including long hours of casualization for teaching staff and students, and many who work multiple part-time jobs to cover their costs. In part of the reaction to the growth of the sub-agriculture, the related light academia subculture has experienced a rise in population, offering a lighter and softer imagery and colors, and more overemphasis in optimism. And there have also been many criticism on our dark academia. It has been criticized, including the aesthetics, perceived Eurocentralization, lack of diversity, and glamorization of unhealthy lifestyle and choices. Critics of the aesthetic have argued that it is the English literary canon from which it draws inspiration from an overwhelmingly white one, with Tim Binkoff claiming that it's associated with content creators who prefer to discuss Oscar Wilde, Olivia Dickinson over Toni Morrison, and James Baldwin. Sarah Burton, a sociology fellow of City University of London, has noted that the aesthetic contains low representation of most women, working class, people of color, um, fatness, people with low economic and cultural capital, disability, caring, and domestic activities and labor, motherhood, queerness, and mutiny of academic life. In response to aesthetics lacks of diversity, and efforts have been made to incorporate literary works from black authors such as Langston Hughes into dark academia. Now, subculture has been criticized as an elitist and old money aesthetic, drawing on the threefold typology of educational traditions outlined by Raymond Williams in his book, The Long Revolution. Amelia Horgan has described dark academia as being rooted in attitudes of old humanities committed in preserving and sustaining a traditional hierarchical culture while preserving a legacy of humanistic studies. Amy Crawford has stated that the subculture tends to romanticize European upper class education. Kevin and Dalby has stated that its association with higher learning in Ivy Leagues, in particular, create elitism and does not enable anyone that is just being part of a group. Others have argued that the aesthetic places are just to emphasize on the aesthetic of the arts in higher education instead of proper study and analysis of work, leading misinterpretations of source material. It has also faced criticism for potentially glamorizing unhealthy behaviors such as the privatization, overwork, and substance misuse. All right, that is it for this episode. I will see y'all next time. Y'all have an excellent day and try to stay cool. I know it's very hot outside.